Okay, this is um, this is gonna be a really personal. This is gonna be a really personal story, and I don't think a lot of people know this story about me and the journey that I kind of went through. uh, okay, so this journey begins with me. So okay, let me get the setting of this story. Let me get the setting of this story correct. Um, I believe it was around 20 2015, roughly. I think around 2015. It had to be around 2015 because I joined the army around 2016. So around 2015, I was dating my ex-girlfriend at the time. And I remember randomly telling my ex-girlfriend, who I was dating, that just at a random feeling struck me, uh, and that feeling was that I wanted to write a book, and so I just, it was very impulsive, just random striking that hit me one day when I was with her. And so I began writing a short story, or uh, what I had intended to be a novel, really. Um, anyways, uh, certain things and situations started occurring in my life, and well, actually, I don't know why I'm avoiding this. The whole point of this video is to be personal, right? So, okay, um, you guys want to know the juice of what happened? Okay, um, I was roommates with my best friend, and we had a falling out because he had invited. Well, he had his girlfriend was now living with him. Was now living with us, and it really just caused a lot of tension within the whole dynamic of him and I. And the reason why, if I remember correctly, the reason why there was tension was because him and I were paying for the apartment, and his girlfriend living with him, his girlfriend living with us now, um, you know, wasn't paying anything. And I remember I told him, I said, well, if she's gonna live here with us, she can at least help pay. I didn't even say pay a third of the rent. I didn't even say that. I said she can at least pay a third of the electricity bill. The electricity bill. And what had happened was, my best friend's girlfriend never paid. She never paid the third of the electricity bill, and it caused a lot of tension between me and my best friend at the time. And this tension would end up leading to a falling out. Him and I got angry with each other, and he grew frustrated because one day he eventually admitted to me that she was never paying and that he was actually paying 2/3 of electricity now. And at the time, we were all working at the same place, the same job. That was Panera, by the way. And um, to be honest, I was barely scraping by, and he he made more money than me because he was, I think, assistant manager at the time, or one of the assistant managers at the time, and I still was, like just maybe a little bit higher of a trainer, but other than that, I wasn't making as much as he was, but it was still stressful for him and it was stressful for him because 2/3 electricity bill was still a lot to cover, and it was really stressful, and so it caused a lot of internal dynamics that was just really a big havoc, uh, and we got angry with each other, and I remember that was one of my moments of anger. I do remember that. I got really really upset one day, with him, and it shocked him. It shocked him. It shocked him because he had never seen me that upset before. Uh, but anyways, I'm telling that specific story because that was the one of the elements that led me to joining the army, because I didn't want to go back home. At the time, living with my mother and my brother was stressful because they were just fighting all the time, and you know I think I was 20, 23 or 22, I think, and I started thinking, you know I yeah, I started thinking that I just I'm 22 now. I don't think that I have to stay here and live in this environment and be a part of these arguments and these fights all the time. And it really wasn't anybody's specific fault, but it was just, yeah, it was just the dynamic that was created from the two, you know. Okay, so that there's that element. So there's the element at home, and then there's the element that had happened in my own apartment. Um, and so this led me to joining the army, right? So now I have randomly, so I had been randomly writing towards a novel, and then I joined the army. Um, Funny enough, my girlfriend breaks up with me when I joined the army. Not immediately, but basically right when I uh, finished up basic training. And I still remember the conversation. The conversation was she wanted space, and I thought that was such a peculiar request because I was very far away at the time, and I was bald. So I didn't really know what she meant by her wanting space, but I mean, I did know what she meant in a sense, because I just sort of expedited that process. I said, you know what? If you want some space, how about I still remember exactly what I said to her. I said, oh, you want some space? Okay, well, let me make it easier for you. We can just break up. Uh, and of course, there followed a fight after that. But uh, that was it. It was a really interesting time of my life, joining the army. I mean, and then I was already going. What I was going through, I mean, was a lot at the time. I was really going through a lot. Um, you know, I know that there's people watching this and they've talked to me before, uh, but the thing is, myself at the time, I was not an avid reader. I had just started writing. I had just started writing, um, but there was one magical moment in basic training. Actually, I didn't realize it was a magical moment, but uh, it was a magical moment. This magical moment was that because basic training was so it was a shock to me. It was a shock. It was a lot of changes were happening uh, all at once, right? A lot of changes were happening all at once. Uh, Physical changes, everything. You know, shaved head for the first time, seeing yourself, coping with that, how you look, being away from family, knowing that this is a commitment that you can't take back really. You signed the contract. I signed the contract for 6 years. So uh, that means I was 23 at the time. That means at 29 I was going to be getting out of the army. And I had no idea what what life was going to look like, or all the changes that occurred through the span of those 6 years. I mean, when I really look back now, just in the span of those 6 years, I have changed dramatically, dramatically. But that's not the point of this story. Well, it actually kind of is a little bit, but it's not the main topic of that. The main topic is to talk about my writing. So the magical moment was that to cope with the nights and the days of basic training, I began writing a short story in my little notebooks. And I remember sharing them with my platoon. Uh, and we all slept in the same, uh, you could say, the same bay. It's like a really big, big, big room with lots of beds. And so I started, I guess I showed it to people. And it's funny because every night I would write more of the story before going to bed. And so what happened was people would come up to me and they would say, "Hey, um, I would like to read your story um, for the night." And so I would give them my notebook and they would read it before they go to bed. Or, you know, and then some of them would let me write more, then they would wait. And it was kind of like, for them, it was like an ongoing episode series, right? They can't wait for the next part. So they would let me write for a couple of days and then be like, okay, can you give it to me for tonight so I can read it? I said, okay. Um, and I would give it to them. And they really enjoyed the story. To be honest, I barely remember the story, but it was a very um, so it was a sort of like magical world with lots of doors, and then sort of ancient creatures, ancient um, magical gods or something. I don't know, something like that. But uh, I guess it was a captivating story. But um, anyways, so uh, after basic training, I had to go into uh, my job training. So that's a little different. My job training at the time was I was going to be trained to be a licensed practical nurse. So that took about roughly a year to get all that training in. So as I was doing my job training, I realized that I just didn't have enough time to write short stories. So I started writing poetry instead. Um, this this was a mind-blowing experience for me because I started realizing that there was there was poetry that was simple and poetry that I could understand. Um, and once I discovered this idea about free verse, right? I didn't know there was different kinds of techniques for poetry, right? The only thing I knew about poetry was like, oh, you got to rhyme and there's a schema. And in some sense, I wasn't wrong, but I didn't know that there was different rules that you could apply to poetry, or different rules and schemas that you could use to write your poetry. And this was really an enlightening experience once I discovered the idea of free verse, because I found it so freeing. Um, uh, and so poetry for me at the time was something that I could get off my chest. I finally had found something that was sort of an outlet to express all the things that were going on, and what I was feeling. Um, okay, so then that really begins the peak of my poetry. But again, I still wasn't quite. Um, I still wasn't really quite reading uh, a lot or anything of that sort. Though I did had though I did begin to read a little bit more poetry, but not much, not much. Um, and so after and so once I actually got into the second half of my nursing school, I made a poetry account, and I remember my friend, my one of my army buddies, told me. He said, "Hey," he's like, "I think you could get really popular with your poetry. He's like, you just have to make another account. Um, you'll grow. You'll grow really fast. Um, just write under a different name, um, and and don't show your face." Now he wasn't like insulting me, but he was saying it was this. He was saying that if you make this elusive character, if you construct this elusive character, it's very attractive. Um, and I said, okay. So what I had started doing was I actually began writing. I mean, I would say this. I did write under my name, under my real name in the beginning, but not for long. It wasn't for long. Um, and I did decide to actually create a dedicated poetry account, which I gave it a sort of a writing, a writing name. I forget what it's called, a pen name. I gave myself a pen name. And at the time it was called A. Fellow. And there's going to be more surprising facts that you guys are going to hear about this pretty soon. Um, and my friend was right. I was starting to gain followers quickly, but it wasn't as fast as he had kind of was enthusiastic about it. It wasn't as fast as that. It was kind of a very steady, slow pace. And I was also at the time connecting deeply with the poetry community on Instagram, and so that's what I was. I really started sharing my my poetry on Instagram, and um, and so I think at the time I was really concerned. I think I had fooled myself in the beginning, where I got where something started off as, poetry was a way to express myself. Slowly, it started turning into a hidden craving for to be known, right? And ironically enough, I did get known to a degree. Um, and just to kind of speed up the story, what happened was uh, I I was intelligent in the sense that I knew the topics and I knew the specific themes that people on Instagram really enjoyed reading, um, and uh, what they really enjoyed reading. And so I embraced the very short, small poems, and people liked it. Now, God, these poems are bad, but um, at the time, I was thinking it was good. But a really popular theme at the time, and I'm pretty sure it's still there. I just stopped really paying attention to it. I really don't care that much. I don't care at all. I guess I'm trying to be nice, be like, no. Yes, I know there's people that still write like that. But anyways, um, so a lot of the themes that people enjoyed was, these sort of very positive um, type of affirmations, type of poetry. Um, and because I knew my poetry audience was women, a lot of them were women. Um, I knew at the time that writing these poems about women and about their strength was going to be an advantageous ploy to gain more followers and more likes on my post. Um, so, so from that moment, you can already tell uh, I wasn't really a sincere writer, but I was very good at giving people what they wanted. I was very good at writing what people wanted. That was the one thing that I was extremely good at. Um, okay, so fast forwarding, um, I eventually revealed myself on my poetry account. People saw who I looked like, um, and then um, and really, honestly, between that, I wouldn't say revealing myself is really what shot me to fame. That's not what it was, but it was doing that specific kind of ploy in my writing that blew me up. And what I mean by blew up was that I was having like thousands of likes on a single poem post, and I would have hundreds of people follow me within a day. My Instagram was literally just like ding 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 ding. It was crazy. Um, uh, I'm pretty sure some people it would be hard to believe now, but actually, if you look back, there's some followers that know this. There's some followers that know this, but at one point, I almost hit 50,000 followers on Instagram with just in a span of 3 months. I'd almost hit a span of 50,000 followers. Um, and, and so there was a lot of people messaging me. Uh, it definitely gave me, uh, and I was struggling with how to deal with this actually, because something that people don't teach you, um, because it rarely happens, is that no one teaches you how to handle when you become famous, or when you, or I mean, I wouldn't even say like I became famous, but I tasted it. No one teaches you how to handle that taste. And really, I mean, honestly, I flew off the walls with it. I flew off the walls with it. Um, I I said horrible things, and I said, you know, disgusting things, um, and you know, to all kinds of women. But um, I mean, it was 50-50, right? At the time, it was 50-50. And somewhere along the way, I hit a wall, and I didn't want to write the way I was writing because it just wasn't. And of course, this is the typical artist um, line coming out here. It wasn't me, right? I wasn't writing for me anymore. Um, and so I started writing a lot of erotic poetry, and people hated this. They hated this. In some sense, I actually knew a lot of people would hate it. Um, and it's like I almost wanted them to hate it. And then I lost so many followers, and so many people got angry with me. So many people sent me messages of disgust, and they were upset with me. They called me misogynist. I'm pretty sure at the time that was probably not far off. Um, but the poetry was um, different, though. It was different in terms of I had discovered something about myself. Uh, and I think what occurred was when I had switched my account writing, when I had switched my poetry that wasn't really sincere into a sort of erotic style, what I discovered was that this was a sort of sexual energy release or whatever that needed to be expressed. Um, and so I expressed it a lot on my account, and people, again, like I said, people got furious and upset. But there were still a lot of my followers that still enjoyed it. Um, uh, so again, a lot of my follower base were women, so a lot of them still enjoyed it, to my surprise. Um, and and so that began the decline of my fame, you could say, my little mini fame that began the decline. Uh, and so I think ever since then, right? Well, not ever since then, but when that decline was happening, I was really struggling with trying to find uh, who I was as a poet, because the way I began, at first it was sincere in the sense that I joined the army. I was trying to expel emotions that were overwhelming me. But then, you know, wanting to get noticed got in the way of really giving sincere poetry. Um, and here's another two facts that people don't know about me. Um, I self-published two books. Well, actually, I self-published one. The other one, I did go through a publisher, but they weren't really. I mean, they weren't really. They were like a publishing company, but they weren't really like, I didn't have like interaction with an editor or anything. They just, I kind of gave them money. They did the cover. They did the whole printing press thing for me. They sold it on their site and sold it on Amazon and everything. And then um, some, I got some revenue from that. Uh, but the first book was more like me in the middle of my peak of becoming, or I had already become mini famous, of being an Instagram influencer. Um, and then the one that I self-published was more towards the decline of that. And I would say that poetry was, I mean, they were actually both sincere poetry. The first book was me dealing with uh, a woman that I, for some reason, I had really grown fond of. I met her here in and I met her in Tennessee actually, but we had interacted first in Instagram, and she was also a poet, and I think that also really attracted me to her. But she just wasn't ready for anything um, much, and even though I did was able to go on a date with her and so on, after that she kind of just dropped off the face of the earth. Um, you could say I got ghosted. I don't know. I mean, but she was going through. At least she claimed she was going through some hard times. I mean, these are all things that I can't really verify. you know. Um, so I guess use your best judgment, right? Maybe it was a ghost. Maybe it was something sincere. Maybe we don't know. I mean, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I can only take things or what people say at face value. So so that was the so that whole book is about one woman. And I think I've had several women tell me, "Oh my God, I would love uh, a man to write me a whole book." Um, but yeah, actually, I don't think the girl ever read the book. To be honest, the girl that wrote a book, I told her about the book, um, but I'm not sure if she ever read it. um, so that caused some heartache. I remember. Um, anyways, and then the last self-published one, that one was more. That one was less about women, but still, uh, at the time, again, a lot of my poetry was about women, and struggling with my own feelings for them. Uh, so that was a absolutely common theme, which really shows how much I've grown as a poet, because oftentimes I don't really write about that topic. uh, so okay, so now we're at the decline, um, and the sexual poetry has also stopped to some degree. It isn't as it isn't as it actually got, ironically, it also got popular. But what I did was I made a separate account, and that separate account got banned. Actually, it got banned by Instagram. Yeah, it got banned because I was just very blunt and obscene, and it was enjoyable because, I mean, it was nice. It was freeing to write something just very obscene and blunt, and something that someone would read and be like, "This just isn't poetry," but it was. Um, it was and it wasn't. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. You could say it was, as Harold Bloom says, it was sincere poetry. um, but it got banned, and I started getting less likes on my posts. I started losing lots of followers. I eventually changed my account name to what it is now, J.E. Rivera, right? So I gave it back my full name. So I reverted back to my full name, uh, which lost me even more followers because then people didn't really know who I was. That's the funny part. They didn't know who I was. Um, but I remember I really struggled with losing that taste of fame, a little taste of it. My posts dropped to, a couple hundred likes, or, and eventually they barely broke 100. And I think now, ironically enough, I think they even barely break 20. Yeah, they barely break 20 likes now. That's funny, but when I look back, right, when I was posting on Instagram and they were breaking like thousands of likes, and I would get like thousands of story shares and so on. It's really funny now that if I post now on Instagram, it probably breaks like 10 or 12 likes. But um, it took me such a long time to get over that. Ironically enough, it took me such a long time. Um, but it was such a beautiful experience in some sense. It was a beautiful experience because I was learning, because I hadn't learned at the time. I was learning how to write without people, without some kind uh, some kind of approval. I was writing without some kind of approval, and this is what I've always needed, because I think I had began. I never began without that. And this is something that I think writers always struggle with. Um, we're writing for some kind of approval, and as much as we fool ourselves, uh, there's always that hint of approval, and this is a very difficult feeling and a very difficult emotion to battle with constantly. And so uh, eventually I got very numb to the Instagram likes and the posts, because I mean at that point I wasn't really getting much anymore. Um, but it was the perfect space for me, because I was finally I was finally uh, hold on, I have to plug in my laptop because I guess I didn't do that. Okay. Okay. Um, so I didn't get to do that, but this was the perfect environment, because finally I could actually write things that, well, people weren't going to read. and I could finally just write whatever. And the funny thing is, I didn't even feel the need to really write sexual poetry, because I mean, nobody was going to read it really. Um, so the sexual poetry declined, and the other type of poems declined, and so I didn't really know what I had left. And what I had left was really tackling what I was feeling, or really tackling what I had felt. But I'm never quite dismissive of the sexual poetry, because the sexual poetry, I was always ashamed of the sexual side, right? The sexual side of myself. Um, so I think to this day, I still don't regret that doing that. I don't regret doing that, because um, it allowed me to have a relationship with that sexual side, and I think that was very needed. Um, and perhaps when I had lost those followers, it was maybe disgusting for them, or it was appalling and obscene for them. But this was something that it had to be done. It had to be done. And actually, funny enough, I still have, even though the first sexual poetry count got banned. It got banned. I am proud of that for some reason, because it's like, wow, it was really against the system there. Um, and I made another one, during deployment. I had made another one. You know, what can I say? Frustrations. Um, but I made another one, and I still occasionally post on it, but nowhere as close as um, as I used to, and nowhere do I feel the need as much as I had began with, this. Now I think now it finally reached, the pinnacle or the touching point where it is a more accepted side of myself. Like, I accepted it, and maybe not other people accepted it, but it's a more accepted side of myself. Um, but so, just to go back to the story again, the decline of the little mini fame and so on. This uh, this taught me a lot, and I still began writing poetry, but I think what was left afterwards was I came into a spiritual void. I hit a spiritual void after all that. And I think maybe that's what all of that had covered over. Um, I had come across a spiritual void. And so, and ironically enough, history for me, in the mind of young Javier, was that history was marked by specific women throughout my life. Um, and each woman that caused a sort of, not cause, but um, each woman was a sort of a signaling point, uh, in my own history of self-development, where every time I was completely shattered by a love for a woman, for the first time I wrote a book, right? That was the first time I ever had enough, um, energy to write a book, and but there was one specific woman that she had, uh, caused, well, not again. I'm really trying not to make it her fault or anything. Um, it's language, tricky language, or habitual language. Um, I was so heartbroken by this woman that I went into a spiritual discourse mode, adventure, and this is when you know, I remember I was struggling with thoughts of suicide at the time, uh, and then I finally decided to say I don't believe in God anymore because I was actually born Christian. I was actually born. Get this! I was actually born Seventh Day Adventist. I was born Seventh Day Adventist, um, and uh, but the thing is, I had a very ambivalent relationship with it because, the way I was born into it was so confining and restrictive that I wasn't. I felt at the time I wasn't able to enjoy my childhood as much. Uh, anyway, so I remember telling my mother for the first time I was an atheist. Man, that scared her so much. I'll never forget that call. Uh, my mom is I wouldn't say she's a very religious woman, but she is religious in the sense that she would want you to still believe in God, for crying out loud. um, okay. So I went through a discourse, a spiritual discourse. I had read the Bhagavad Gita. I was meditating. I read the Buddhist scriptures. I was studying Taoism and Buddhism and Hinduism and meditating so much and so much, and reading all these spiritual books. Um, uh, and so my writing turned more spiritual. Now I'm going to tell you why this wasn't enough. But at the time, I wouldn't know why it wasn't enough. Um, it was sincere poetry, but it wasn't the thing. You know, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are listening to, well, what's the thing? Well, I'm going to get there because this is where we get to, we're approaching to now, which is very important. So I think what had happened throughout the whole spiritual discourse was that uh, my two best friends had deployed, and I had spent a lot of time with them. Uh, and again, I didn't really know how to deal with myself. But see, the thing about myself, the thing about me is that I can easily get very accustomed and attached to people very easily. Uh, you could say I'm a very fiery lover. You know, like I will, uh, the love will be like a burst of flames, and then boom, it's gone. Not because not because I, well, actually, well, yes, but you could say it's because you, when you love that hard, it dies, basically. Or you make the other person run away, or you are not interested anymore, whatever the case may be. Anyways, um, but the thing about myself, that still wasn't the thing. The thing about myself was that once I get a taste of loneliness again, about how good it is, it's really hard to go back sometimes. So I was still in this spiritual journey, and I promise you this is still going to relate to my writing. In my spiritual journey, I was still looking for something. I was still looking for something. My God, I was still looking for something. And I didn't know what it was. Okay, so this marks the time when I became Muslim. Uh, and so, fast forwarding a little bit, I became Muslim. and I had read the Quran through and through. Very, very interesting experience. And you get to hear a lot of stories, a lot of stories that you've never heard before. So this is really quite a piece of literature here. Because funny enough, I've never read the Bible all through, but the Quran, the way it's sort of manufactured, the way it's set up, it's a very interesting piece of work. In general, it's a very interesting piece of work, and I really enjoy the part where it shows a lot of the stories about the prophets and so on. Those are really good stories. But anyways, deployment came for me around 2019, and I deployed to Afghanistan. Deployment was something I don't talk about often, and there's things I actually can't talk about because of the nature of it. I can't talk about it. You know, it's funny, right? Like, you want to talk about your experiences, but there's just things that you're just not allowed to talk about. That's the funny part. But I want to be honest when I say this. Nothing happened dramatic in the sense of the war stories that we hear. I was in a combat zone. That is true. I was there for 9 months. That is true. Did I see people die? Yes. Were they U.S. soldiers? No. Did it make me numb to death? Yes, to some degree. I mean, I feel, I don't know. There's something about that that I'm not, I'm not struck by it the way it used to strike, like a common person. That for me, it's almost like brushing your teeth. uh, so, anyways, I was really struggling on deployment, not with the, not because I was in some kind of uh, combat zone. No, I was struggling with myself. I was struggling with, uh, the elements of myself, and I was trying to be, a very faithful Muslim. And this goes again back to the relationship to my sexual side, right? Because in Islam you have to be more, conservative and so on. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Uh, but ironically enough, because I would always try to conserve it, it always ended up bursting out, right? And I had to do it, and I had to write it in poetry form and so on. And, but of course, it also made a lot of my relationships with women very superficial, right? And so this is the very, this is the a lot of the crux of the issue here is that when you try to avoid or contain, like this is what I learned about myself. When I try to avoid and contain my sexual energy, um, it fires back at me, right? It makes my relationship with other women very superficial, very, almost manipulative and, uh, shallow. And it's like if you don't get out that energy in some fashion or find a woman that accepts it and just whatever, um, then, you're just kind of stuck in that zone. And the funny thing is, because I was shameful, I became more shameful of it because I was Muslim and struggling. Um, but I think the key part of the deployment was I was really struggling with my faith. Uh, but this caused another breakthrough in my writing. Uh, because I was writing very spiritual, and now it became very monotheist. Uh, but then on the side, I was writing sexual uh, things just to keep myself, well, let the remainder, whatever, go somewhere. And it wasn't enough. But when I got back, uh, everything really started. Well, actually, I'm not. Hold on. I'm not gonna say everything crashed, because it was in the midst of my crisis on deployment that I actually found reading. I found the love of reading. Um, and that's actually where I picked up my habit of reading now. Uh, and that's when I read for the first time my first real philosopher. Of course, it's not real in the sense of your typical philosophers, but he was a contemporary Muslim philosopher, Allama Iqbal, and he was very familiar with Western philosophy. And this was the first time I had encountered uh, philosophy. And I was so immersed by it, so immersed. The thing was, Allama Iqbal was also a poet. He was a very famous poet, actually, more than his philosophy. Um, and I did love his poetry. But this was the first time I really got into reading. And so now there's an element now to my writing that is beneficial, because I could never quite develop uh, that writing because I wasn't reading. And I actually felt that I could write without reading. That's what I've truly felt. Um, but that to me, that just can't be the case. So again, fast forwarding, I get back home finally. Uh, Basically, I still had clung on to my faith, but uh, it was dwindling. It was dwindling, and now it's still. I mean, you could say this. I'm no longer Muslim anymore. Um, but my relationship is different. It's different, and I think because I fell in love with philosophy, and this is when I also started falling in love with psychoanalysis at the time too. Um, the same thing starts to occur, and this is a recurring theme because see, it happened with my own spiritual quest where there was something that wasn't satisfactory, and then I thought it was um, Islam, and then I thought it was um, philosophy and psychoanalysis, and this is where we hit till now. And of course, this could all change. This could all change, but um, what I realized was that poetry uh, is the only thing that gives close to the satisfaction if I give it, my purest, I mean, my purest being. And what I mean by purest being, I mean, what I mean by pure is that I give it my whole being. If I give it my whole being, it becomes satisfactory and it becomes my only connection, my only religion, in the sense that it becomes uh, my spiritual act, my spiritual connection uh, to something. Right? This is the only thing that I have. You could say, or a form of prayer in this sense. I think I think because I have read a bit of philosophy now, that God is is a name that doesn't live up to what we're actually talking about when we say God, uh, and it's very distracting, honestly. Like, I mean, you could just see it on people's faces, right? God, reminds me of my childhood. But yes, so this is what has led up to now, and this revelation, right, um, was something that I truly struggled with because there's still moments where I think and believe that I can be something else, meaning, be a novelist or something. But the thing is, I've tried that so much. I've really tried, and it just isn't there. In fact, and even when I write pieces of philosophy, I find myself day by day growing more and more unsatisfactory. Good, unsatisfactory. Growing more and more unsatisfied about it. And it's the same thing with psychoanalysis. I grow more and more unsatisfied. I mean, I enjoy reading them, but I'm not sure if I enjoy writing them. And that's a very honest moment. That's a very honest moment, I think. So I don't think I enjoy writing them. I enjoy reading them. I think I could enjoy reading a lot of things. Um, so so now this is where I'm at. I'm writing poetry and connecting again once more instead of using a spiritual and writing about spiritual things. See, that was the key thing that I said that wasn't enough. It's not enough to write about spiritual things. I think the content is not what really matters for spiritual. What makes the work or poetry spiritual for me is that I am, like I said, I'm giving something. I'm giving all of myself uh, in this piece of work. And because I am connecting. It is becoming a spiritual movement. You could say it is becomes an entire prayer in one poem. So, uh, yeah, I think I think that's everything. Um, I know I could talk about a lot more. Uh, there's always more things to talk about, but I changed a lot, and because of that, my poetry changed a lot. My writing has also changed. Uh, I think when people interact with me now, sometimes I want to say how lucky you are. um, but there's also people that have been there the whole time. So, and what a roller coaster that must have been. Uh, so, but yeah, I know I could add more, but it seems like I think I got what I wanted to get across with poetry, and that my course of history with poetry and writing, because it was very relevant for all the events I was going through in my life, and every single woman that it's funny when I look back about women as the sort of uh, points of events in history in my own past, is that it's not the women that I dated. It was always the women that I never had. Uh, those were the ones that were more painful for me. You know, it's strange for me. I think maybe that's like I find that's a very peculiar part about me, is that when I'm dating someone, or when I'm in a relationship with someone, if it ends, it's not something that actually causes me a lot of pain, ironically enough, because for me, yeah, I look at it as like, well, we tried and it didn't work. It's not something I dwell on too much, but it's the women that I could never have that made me dwell so long, and for took a very long time. Took a very long time to grapple with those feelings, and actually find a way to escape, not in a negative escape, but a productive escape. Productive escape. But yes. Anyways, that's the story. That's the uh, untold story of Javier Vera within a span of 6 years, and so much has changed, and so much more will change. Absolutely, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you ask me, "Well, uh, you still a poet?" Maybe I am. Maybe I won't be. But I like to think that I think the poet inside me is going to stay. Okay, take care, guys.